Hello, Bill.
Matt. How are you doing today?
You know I'm supposed to go first, Bill.
Do you want to just restart it?
No, this is part of the show. This is our. Anyway, I am well. I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. How is Southern DMZ?
Southern DMZ's good. We had a little storm that came through. Although Comcast, not happy with them. I've not had cable or internet for over a week, so that is not good. But otherwise,
no matter where you are in the DMZ, Comcast sucks. That's not unique to your province.
I'm about to go to level 2 if this isn't fixed. So stay tuned for that. Look, but I'm hoping. I'm literally. We're reaching. Like, I'm now reaching out to the Comcast lobbyists to try to get it. Like, you have to know somebody to get things fixed. Like, this is like Russia, where it's a monopoly. I mean, you really have to have some sort of connections to get your cable turned back on.
Look, I mean, Comcast essentially sucks you in because, look, it's generally not competitive. This is not an example of good liberal regulation, I would say, that we have an effective, oligarchy of cable companies. And Comcast doubly sucks you in by having the bundle of cable and internet. And so if you want one or the other, you feel compelled to go with them, and you don't feel you have a lot of choice.
And then the only option is like the Dish, and I'm hearing bad things about them too lately. I was gonna because I've sent a few I don't want to say threatening tweets to Comcast, but there's this huge wire in my front yard. It's probably not dangerous because it's cable, but it looks very menacing because it's like hanging down from the phone pole, and it's like by the sidewalk, and I keep taking pictures of it and tweeting. And I was going to tweet, at Comcast, I'm about to sign up with the Dish, and I started searching for tweets about the Dish, and they were all like talking about how horrible it is. And apparently they canceled AMC last week or something, and people are up in arms about that. So, Cable Town.
The way to stick it to Comcast is cut the cable. Cut the cable and go to DSL.
I don't know what I'm going to do, man. It's getting it's starting to get ugly in Southern DMZ.
Now I know. We were talking earlier. We do a little pre-chat before we do this, and
people don't know about that. The pre-interview before the show. We do an hour and a half of talking before this. This doesn't just happen.
And so I know you are not enthusiastic about discussing the campaign today.
Yeah, I just it's one of those things. It's not that I'm not that I don't want to talk about it. Just I don't know what I have to add. It's so boring.
Does it feel just like we're on the same? We're stuck on a scratch on the record.
You know what we should talk about. You know what actually is a little bit exciting. And we did not. In fairness, we didn't talk about this in the pregame show. What we should talk about is who's going to be the VP, because I actually put together today at the Daily Caller my down and dirty guide to Romney's VP selection, and I've ranked them in order of likelihood. So that's a little bit exciting. To me, that's more. We could talk about Bain, and it's the bane of my existence and all that, but the VP thing. I still find that a little bit enticing.
I just want to ask you one quick thing before we do the VP. Do you think the Boston Globe Bain story is fatal or near fatal for Romney, or is he going to blow past it?
Good question. I was surprised by how many mainstream journalists on Twitter this morning were like saying this is a game changer. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I think that Romney officially left, I think that Romney left his leadership role at Bain in 1999 and still on paper, controlled stuff and probably was privy to some information. But but I don't think that this is any sort of smoking gun. And by the way, I was one of the people during the primary saying that I thought it was healthy that, or good, or at least appropriate that Newt Gingrich asked questions about Bain, that these things were legitimate. I mean, look, I think there's even if Romney were at Bain, I still think you could make an argument that, yeah, some of the stuff that happened then, well, that's creative destruction. That's the market, and it's unfortunate, but
This was so strange the way Romney's handling it. I mean, on one hand, he's saying, "Look at my record at Bain. This shows why I'm so awesome. I can fix the economy." But everything that had happened the minute I left day-to-day operations, if that's what actually happened, because Boston Open disputes it. But after that moment, Bain was completely unrelated to me. All those awful things that Bain did, I had nothing to do with. It just doesn't seem to gel. That if he built up this wonderful company, that it became this rogue bastard child after he walked away.
Well, I think that it's a product of politics. I think that that it just so happened that some of the very egregious, or not even egregious, but some of the things that Bain did, which would be easy to demonize, just happened to occur after he left. So the easiest response for them is, hey, he wasn't even there at the time. But I think you're right that it's not necessarily the best argument to say he wasn't there at the time. Even though I think he probably wasn't there at the time, what it means is that you're sort of conceding that it was bad. And I think that what happens in venture capitalism or just in capitalism is that the guy who made horse and buggies was probably ticked off and maybe lost his job when the car was invented. The guy. What about all the people who used to deliver milk? I mean, and by the way, even though I believe that this creative destruction, this Schumpeter, I guess. He didn't originally name it that, but popularized it. Even though I think it's very healthy and productive for our society, at large, there are people who are left behind, and there are when technology changes, and there are families that are hurt and people who are hurt very badly. And now, you wouldn't say that, okay, that's a good reason that we shouldn't have invented the car. I was reading. I have to figure out who it was. I have to go back and find this, but I was reading a while back. I think it was in the New York Times about a famous golfer whose dad committed suicide, and it was like one of those instances where he was in an industry that just went out of fashion, And, I mean, there are people left behind, and there are sob stories, but, it's the making sausage. It's like politics making sausage. Same thing. It's not all.
Ron, it could be saying something like, when I was in the private sector, I had to put my business first, and because that's how innovation happens, and that's how we grow and move forward. But as a public official, you have to worry about, who does get left behind in this process, and we need to have some policies that make sure that folks don't fall off the cliff. I don't see why that's that hard an argument to make as long as you're not trapped into ideological boxes. But he just seems to be running away from the whole subject.
Yeah, I think the problem is that if you're playing politics, if you're in a political campaign, and one side says Mitt Romney put people out of work, he closed down factories and cost people jobs in their livelihood. And Mitt Romney says, well, that's technically true, but this is all for the better good. You have to understand that in capital, Romney loses that. Now, if Romney and Obama did an hour-long dialogue, if they were to enter into the DMZ, and by the way, the invitation is on the table, They may be able to have a thoughtful discussion about that, and Romney at the end, the very thoughtful listeners and viewers of Bloggingheads very well may say, Romney's right. I mean, but in a political campaign of sound bites, Romney loses that argument. Because
Mitt Romney can't defend capitalism on the public stage.
Well, no, the rule is if you were explaining, you are losing. That's the rule. And
Romney said the rule himself now publicly. Romney has revealed the rule.
It's true. And if Obama is on offense saying, you did this, you hurt people, you put people out of work, and here's video of them, and here's pictures of them, and Romney says, no, but let me explain. You could have said the same thing about the horse and buggy. He is going to look...
I want the opportunity to say that I was right about something. Because, a few shows ago I said, look, Obama's always on offense, Romney's always on defense. Bain is an example of that. And if Bain's not working, then you'll see Obama stop talking about it. And I think we've seen since then Obama stay on offense, stay talking about Bain, and reaping the rewards for that.
Okay, I think clearly you're right about the offense thing. I think that Obama has had some until the past week, he'd had a couple of very bad months, and yet he is almost always on offense. He is almost always defining the topic, and Romney is almost always on defense. And Romney's really good at counterpunching, but still, if you're on defense, you're on defense.
And he's behind. Even just by a little, he's behind. You got to do something to get an offense to change that.
Right, and that's the frustration. That's the frustration with the whole, quote unquote, rope-a-dope strategy. Is that Romney has to do something. You can't just run out the clock and assume that because the economy's bad, if you just survive till November, you're going to be elected president. And Romney it seems that that's part of their strategy, is to just don't make waves, stay under the radar. Meanwhile, Obama is taking the fight to him every day and attacking every day, playing offense, and usually the guy who takes, it's like a fight. The guy who throws the first punch very likely wins. And I think Obama's been on offense. I don't know about the Bain thing. I'm still not convinced that that it moves the needle. It may be that it's an obvious hit, and it may be that that Obama is throwing some spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. I don't think you can infer or conclude that because Obama has come back to it, that it's conclusive that it's going to work. Yet.
Well, I think I successfully warmed you up.
Let's talk about
VP rankings.
All right, so I did the thing where I ranked who's most likely to be VP. And I have 6 people that I think are deserving to be on the list. And that'll be, there'll be people who criticize.
So is this who should be on the list, or you think will be on the list?
This is who the 6 people who will be on the list. These are the 6 people that I think Romney, I'm getting in Romney's head, which is different than my head. I would have different picks. But, and I went through the good and the bad, right? So I think that right now, the number one likely pick, believe it or not, is Tim Pawlenty, former governor of Minnesota. He was an early endorser of Romney. Romney is very comfortable with him. He's boring, but I think that helps. I think Romney is risk averse. I think Romney's looking at this, basically do no harm. If I pick this person, what will they say? What's the bad thing that they will say? And there's really nothing bad you say about the Tim Pawlenty pick, except he's a little bit boring. So I think Pawlenty is my number one pick. Number 2, Rob Portman. Also boring. Also, he is from Ohio, which potentially could help, but I don't really think Rob Portman can deliver Ohio. I don't think most Ohioans know who he is.
There's no Portman machine in Ohio.
Yeah, the Portman machine. I think that was the Pendergast machine in Missouri, but I don't think there's a Portman machine. The other problem with Portman is he's very intricately tied to the Bush administration. I think it was like, what is he, OMB? What was his?
Yeah, I think it was OMB.
So that's a strike against him. But I still think he's at the top of the list. I think here's someone who's rising, in my opinion, Bobby Jindal. And as I've said, Jindal is the most exciting person who's safe, and he's the safest person who's exciting. So Bobby Jindal, of course, is governor of Louisiana, but he was also like a 2 or 3 term, maybe 4, but I think maybe like a 3-term congressman. He's a Rhodes Scholar, very bright. So I think that he's safe in the sense that nobody can say he's inexperienced. He's been a congressman. He's been a governor. I think he's exciting basically because he's Indian American. It would be a historic election in that regard.
Identity politics, for shame.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm getting real with you here, Bill. I'm being real with you. I think that's largely what makes it exciting, because otherwise he's too wonky, he's too in the weeds, he talks really fast, and obviously he gave a really bad speech, which I think maybe helps him, ironically. I don't think
it's a low bar.
Yeah, exactly. So those are my top 3. Number 4.
I would quibble about Jindal being safe. I don't think he's that safe.
You don't think he's that?
I mean, you're right as far as his resume goes. I mean, he certainly has a very well-rounded resume, particularly for someone as young as he is. But there are some weird things in his bio about sort of the exorcism stuff, some of the social conservatism stuff, and I think that would maybe raise an eyebrow that maybe Romney wouldn't want to go down that path.
That's a good point. I had forgotten about that, and that's a good point. I think, judging from my judgment of Romney, I think, so all of this exists in Sarah Palin looms large over this. And even though I think that Palin actually helped McCain electorally, the perception is that she hurt him. And so I think Romney is going to be very averse to picking anybody deemed to be inexperienced, which is why Chris Christie and Marco Rubio on this list come in number 5th and 6th place, respectively. I think they should be at the top of the list, but I think that Romney would not pick them because they've owned their, first-term governor, first-term senator. And so I think that Romney, Romney is more concerned about someone who's been in office many years than the other side. But you're right, I've forgotten about some of those things you brought up. There is no safe candidate.
I will say I suspect the Romney team will be better vetters than the McCain team. So if he was going to pick someone like Jindal, I'm sure he would ask him about that stuff, 9 Ways to Sunday, and make sure they knew what they were going to say about it if he is picked.
Yeah, and I think that that Jindal would presumably be more prepared to respond to that and to have a good answer. The number 4, I've already told you 5 and 6, Christie and Rubio, but 4 is Paul Ryan. I think Paul Ryan is on the short list, which I think would be interesting. I think he would help. He would help Romney with the base. He can go on Meet the Press tomorrow and be fine. He's obviously very smart. He's been in politics for a long time. I think since '98, longer than people think.
I would also quibble a bit. I mean, on one hand, he's been at Meet the Press a lot.
Right.
He's very comfortable with that circuit. He has good personal relationships with the media. They treat him very nicely up until now. But once you're VP or nominated for VP, those questions are going to change.
Yeah, that's true.
Is he going to get all tied up in knots about Ayn Rand? Is he going to get tied up in knots about defending his Medicare proposal? I mean, he would have a level of scrutiny that perhaps he might be a little unused to.
Yep.
You're
exactly
why is
right.
everyone being chummy with me the way they used to be? I mean, McCain had that problem. McCain, all these guys were my friends, 6 months ago. Now they're being mean to me.
Right. No, you're exactly right. You were exactly right about that. However, presumably somebody who has a lot of experience doing media is better, unless they get duped into believing that the press are their friends. They're presumably better equipped than someone who's, say, from Alaska, Governor of Alaska. I think Palin helped McCain, and I think she did a lot of things really, really well. But it's asking a lot to take someone who's governor of Alaska and all of a sudden put them in the middle of a race. Presumably someone like Ryan would be better prepared, or Jindal for that matter, or Rubio or Christie even. The problem with Ryan is, number one, he's just a House member. It was a lot.
But he's more than a House member.
He's the chairman of the budget. He is the chairman of the budget committee.
He's the intellectual leader of the House Republicans. But he's not a backbencher.
Okay, that's a fair point.
But if you pick him, then Romney's essentially saying, "I'm going to defend the Ryan budget between now and Election Day," and I don't know if he wants to do that.
No, it's a good point. I think that's also. I think it's definitely a challenge. You could argue, hey, it's baked in the cake anyway. You're going to be accused of embracing the Ryan budget no matter what. But if Ryan's on the ticket, it becomes, it takes you.
The way Romney has handled the Ryan budget up until now, he has sort of, endorsed it in the broad sense, and it's really fair game for Obama to say, you endorse this, I'm going to make you own that. But I suspect when Romney rolls out some of his specific proposals, there'll be differences, and they'll say, well, I agree with the direction of the Ryan budget, but I would do this a little bit differently here and a little bit differently there. And once Ryan's your VP and you try that tack, that becomes a lot more awkward.
So I think Rubio should be much higher. I think he actually delivers Florida. I think that he, as vice president, could do a lot.
Why do you think there was this leak saying he wasn't on the list in the first place? Why is there something about the vet that's making the Romney team pause?
I don't believe that story that he wasn't being vetted or wasn't on the list, but I do think that I don't think Romney will pick Rubio because Rubio has only been in the Senate for 2 years. He was Speaker of the House in Florida, but I think that Romney will not pick somebody who hasn't served a couple terms. I don't. That's the same thing with Chris Christie. If Chris Christie was elected in 2008 and had been reelected, or if he had been elected in 2006 and had been reelected in 2010, say, then I think it's a totally different thing. But I think
my sense is that the Christie approach to politics and the Romney approach to politics are just 180 degrees apart. I just can't see that.
Right, but see the yin and the yang. Don't you think that they could use that for their advantage, though? That Christie could be the attack dog.
Forgive me for perhaps trafficking in character assassination without basis, but I just have this feeling that Christie's just not mentally balanced. It's one thing to be sort of loosey-goosey and informal and have a spark and be exciting, but he's just done too many things I find just straight out odd. If you are really thinking you're on the short list to be VP and you cut off a reporter's question by calling him stupid, that's not a signal to the top guy that you're ready for prime time. You cannot get away with that.
But yet he
national ticket.
And yet he has.
He has in New Jersey. There's no evidence that's going to fly on the national stage.
Well, I don't think he's going to be picked. But I think that it could be interesting that Romney could use that. That in a way it could be a shield for Romney, and that he could be the attack dog. They could divide up, go to different parts of the country. You know Chris Christie is going to draw a crowd. You know he's going to be able to attack Romney and just, with his plain, hey, we're broke. We're broke. That's the problem. We're broke. I mean, you could see him in his very matter-of-fact manner attacking Obama in a way that Romney just can't, and Jindal couldn't, and or Paul Ryan couldn't.
That's true, but Christie has a way of making himself the story as he does that. And then you have all these, the cable catnip about, Christie doing this and Christie doing that. I mean, that could just so easily overshadow. It's like a Palin.
It could be,
but just overshadows the candidate.
Yes, but I think that I don't think it would be easy. I don't think it would be easy to make Christie. You're not going to make Christie look dumb. There will be the perfunctory Saturday Night Live skit of some, big. It's too bad Chris Farley isn't around for this. Let's just say. But
I think you can make Christie look unstable. I think you make Christie look unhinged and not ready to be present at a moment's notice.
Don't you think he connects to a lot of Joe Sixpacks? And he won. I mean, New Jersey doesn't really tend to elect. I mean, it's a blue state. I think there's like 700,000 more Democrats. Don't you think he resonates with a certain Joe Sixpack crowd and in places like Ohio and Wisconsin? And
there is yet to be a pugnacious tri-state area politician that's been able to go national in a very long time.
This is interesting.
A certain breed of politician.
This
doesn't seem to travel well.
Damn you and your actual book learning and history. All right, well, give me some examples of.
Well, Giuliani. Giuliani couldn't even get couldn't fly. Ed Koch couldn't even go statewide.
Yeah, but that's. Floating. I mean, I don't know that Giuliani. Number one, New York's unique. He was just a mayor. He wasn't governor. And he was America's mayor, in fairness. But he dressed in drag. He walked in, gay marches. I mean, Christie hasn't done that, as far as I know.
He hasn't done that, but he has this shtick of going to town halls and insulting the participants, and then compiling the YouTube
That's
clips.
A feature, not a bug. That's.
I mean, isn't it weird that you hit a YouTube channel mark? He has 5 million YouTube hits now. And he has his team compile the list of times he's being a jerk to his constituents, sends it to the press while he has a chance of being named for VP and saying, this is my calling card.
Yeah, I got to say, I think that's strange. But I think a lot of people find it refreshing. Like that time that woman asked him, like, where do you send your kids to school? And that's none of your business. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who say, politicians are too scripted, and here's a real guy, and he gets away with it. Now, I don't know why he gets away with it, but he gets to say these things and do these things that if someone else did, it would be a scandal and they'd resign. But he does. And I think that,
I'll believe he's getting away with it when he gets reelected as governor.
Well, last I checked, he's on his way to do that.
I mean, as his poll numbers are up, I give you that, and that's a point in his favor as far as New Jersey voters are concerned. I do think this kind of shtick has a tendency to wear poorly over time.
You know what I think it is. If I don't concede that he's unbalanced, but if he is, then you'll be right, because he'll keep the hubris thing where you just keep pushing it, right? Right. And that's the danger, that you take it to the next level.
Well, it's the classic Spinal Tap line. It's a fine line between stupid and clever. I mean, there obviously is a market for an unscripted, refreshing, regular guy as a politician, which Romney is not, and which Portman is not, and maybe Plenty's got a little bit of that, but.
Yeah, the hardest thing.
You can very easily take that too far, where people say, "Hey, you're not refreshing. You're a bully, or you're a jerk, or you're simply not somebody that represents the country."
Until he yells at me, I kind of like it, but So anyway,
don't you want to yell? You want to tell your grandkids? Chris Christie yelled at me on YouTube.
Well, anyway, that's where I see it. I think it will probably be I think it'll probably be Tim Pawlenty.
Pawlenty, that's your call. You're making it now.
Let me nuance it. This is weasel words, but okay. My top 4 list, right, was Pawlenty most likely. Then you have Portman. Then you have Jindal, and then you have Paul Ryan. So I would say that there is a 90% chance that Romney will pick one of those 4. Now, there are people that, like Kelly Ayotte. I don't think he will pick her, but...
no chance he picks a woman?
Probably not. I don't think he will, but I'm saying, like, there's a chance. But I would say 90% chance that he picks one of those 4, Pawlenty, Portman, Jindal, or Paul Ryan. Would you agree with that, Bill? Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't know if he is going to look at that, because he's presumably going to make this pick relatively soon. There's some indication he's not going to wait till the end of August, right before the convention.
Right, and the reason for that is that the sooner he has a running mate, the sooner they can divide up. He has one person who automatically draws a crowd, who can fundraise, who can give speeches simultaneously. They can almost double their reach. Now, there's the other argument, which is delay making a big decision as long as you can, because new information could always come forward. But I tend to think that Romney goes early. He doesn't wait till the convention or close to the convention.
That says to me he's making this decision from a position of relative weakness.
Right, because he needs to make money.
I need to do something to not be behind anymore.
Yeah.
And that says to me he's not coming at it simply from the perspective of who makes the best president in case something happens to me. Which is not unusual. I mean, I'm not saying that makes him particularly, we can't. But I do wonder, does it make a Kelly Ayotte more possible? Is going to look at where he stands demographically and say, okay, what do I need to bridge the gap? I'm weak with unmarried women in a huge way. I got to cut into that somehow. Or is it simply going to be a state pick? And therefore a Portman in Ohio or making Minnesota competitive is worth it to him? Or is all that just going to be a non-factor, and he's going to say, I just want a guy who I feel personally comfortable with, who doubles my brand, button down, the Republican brand of no drama, no sizzle, just steak, that kind of thing.
I think that's what he does, Bill. I think that the last thing you said, I think he picks someone he's comfortable with, someone who is safe, someone who's experienced. Portman, if you look at the top 3 or 4, top 3, Portman is the one who's from an important state, Ohio, but I don't think Portman delivers Ohio. They may win Ohio, but I don't think that Portman can guarantee Ohio. I think the only... And I could be wrong about this, too. But I think the only person who delivers a state is Rubio. Everybody talks about Rubio's young, and he's Hispanic, and all that. To me, I think if you're going to look at it from an electoral standpoint, and by the way, there are governing reasons that I like Rubio, too. But from an electoral standpoint, I think Rubio could deliver Florida. So to me,
he would be the first person to deliver a state since I'm not even sure when.
Lyndon Johnson in 1960.
There you go.
but everybody says that nobody delivers. And let me also say this, but I wrote a while back this thing about you shouldn't pick someone based on electoral reasons. And I just did a sort of a kind of quick history, reading of history, just revisiting history. I think that that candidates who were picked for electoral reasons probably have as good a record governing as candidates who were picked strictly for governing. I mean, Dick Cheney, if you want more Dick Cheney, then eschew the electoral pick, because he was from Wyoming and, really didn't bring a lot to the table, except maybe gravitas that Bush maybe lacked. So I guess you could argue that by going with the governing choice, it was also a shrewd electoral campaign choice. But in terms of delivering a state, I mean, Wyoming was very irrelevant. So, but I actually would argue that Cheney, the fact that Cheney didn't want to run himself, had no political ambition himself, was not necessarily a good thing.
From a political standpoint or a governing standpoint?
Both, from a governing standpoint.
That he was a little too free to go his own way and not stay on the team? Yeah,
I think he said things like, what was the question? Someone asked him a question, he's just like, so?
Right.
A guy who's thinking about running for office in the future
isn't that refreshing, though?
You got me on that one, Bill. If Christie said it, he would have done it with panache. All right, so what do you want to talk about? How are we doing on time here?
Well, we've done about 35 minutes. I think we could do one more. You had your hip hop samples idea, and you had your optimism pessimism follow through thought.
Well, I would ask the audience, but obviously we can't do that. So let's talk about the hip hop thing.
Okay, so you thought about this. This is an outgrowth of where your mind went following my op-ed, I think.
Yeah.
About how liberals win, talking about how liberal policies advance after hard bargaining is done with corporations, and not typically when corporations are frontally challenged and fought. But because of you, this has kicked up a resurgence on the right of, this proves that there's a Faustian bargain between liberals and corporations that's anti-market, and which Goldberg calls liberal fascism. You and Tim Carney are more along the crony capitalism lines.
Right. So the idea
that led you to hip hop.
Well, nobody knows more about hip hop than I do, Bill. Number one. But putting that aside, no, the point that we try to make is that big business and free markets are often at odds. That free markets like competition, big businesses don't want competition, and so if big business and government can work together, they can create barriers to entry. So regulations that only big business can comply with because they have the money and the lawyers to meet these onerous regulations, or even laws. Big business may like certain laws that they can comply with, but it would be harder for the new guy, the new business, the upstart, to comply with. So I ran across this story in the Washington Post, which I thought made... It was a way. It's not a perfect analogy because of the intellectual property stuff, but I thought it was a good way to use a pop culture example to make this point. And so I'll just read a little bit of it to you. It's a Washington Post story, and it's about sampling. Where they will steal, use, whatever. Someone else's music, right? And the Beastie Boys would do this. They would take Led Zeppelin songs or whatever. And so there's a story, and the Washington Post writer says, today, if you want to sample, just as Kanye West does in his recent chart, Topper Mercy, you need to be able to afford it. And Hank Shockley, who's a hip-hop, I guess, sort of legend who...
He's the Bomb Squad, right?
I think so. He's in a documentary coming out called Dust: The Art of Sampling, and he says in the promo to that documentary, he says, "What's happening to sampling? It's now becoming for the elite. Jay-Z and Kanye can afford to sample. They can afford sample rates, but not the kids starting out on their own little home studio in their house. And so, to me, here's the interesting point. It's now, if you think about it, it's in the best interest of Kanye to support laws and regulations and to support politicians who will uphold the regulations against sampling. Now, he may not do it because, it would ruin his street cred or it would be bad publicity, but you see the point. And in a truly rational market, Jay-Z and Kanye would benefit. It would be in their best interest to support laws that would prohibit the next public enemy from becoming a competitor. And that was sort of my point, and I will throw it to you, Bill, for commentary.
Well, I think what you're saying there, is somewhat, I don't think it negates the premise of my op-ed. My op-ed is about how do you get liberal ideas advanced, and that historically happens when there is some kind of bargain done with corporations. Now, the way our copyright law is constructed, there's no liberal part of that was part of the deal. We have copyright law because we have copyright law, it is an example, I think, or at least can be argued as an example of a collusion between government and big business. And there's certainly plenty of folks, I think, on the left and the right who don't like the way intellectual property is unevenly administered, where it seems like big corporations can protect their intellectual property, but then they have the right to infringe on other people's intellectual property. And so I hear lots of that sort of criticism from all sides.
Right.
But to your point, though, I mean, I agree that those type. Well, there's 2 points on it. One, I don't think that is that clean cut issue, because I do think there is a legitimate argument that artists have, and artists don't agree on this subject. But some artists would say, look, I created that song, so for you to sample my song and make money off it, and I don't see a dime, that's not fair to me. So I don't think that is a clear-cut ideological dispute there. That's just sort of a part of the complicated issue. But to accept your argument, I don't think that, those types of concerns should be front of mind when having these types of negotiations, and if problems occur, should then be addressed. I don't think that because there's a risk of that sort of thing happening means we should never try to find common ground between liberals and corporations for anything.
So I guess, first of all, to talk about patents and intellectual property, I do think that patents have their place. So, for example, developing a drug, there's an incredible amount of research and development cost to making the first pill, and the second pill costs 5 cents. So, it would be a disincentive for innovation. Nobody would want to be the first to develop the drug if then, as soon as it comes out, you've spent millions and millions of dollars developing it, and someone else could rip you off. So I think the problem is, I believe patents are 20-year patents. I think we need 3-year patents for things that are, So I am sympathetic to the intellectual property argument. I'm not necessarily against it. To me, though, that actually was the fact that we're having the discussion and the debate about copyright and patents and whatnot is actually the reason this was a flawed analogy. Because my point was never to engage in whether or not you should be allowed to steal someone's music and put it in yours, and whether or not that constitutes a new thing that that you're being creative by creating something new, or whether that's an infringement. My point is simply to use a pop culture example to explain why big business likes regulations and certain laws. And I do believe that that this illustrates it would be in the best interest of Kanye and Jay-Z to support politicians who will uphold these, whether or not Kanye and Jay-Z believe in it. It would be in their best interest from a business standpoint, because they are now rich, they are now big business, to support laws which would prevent future competitors, the next Public Enemy, the next Beastie Boys, from being able to do it.
But to circle back from where we started today, I mean, look, I think the regulations we have regarding the cable industry, which are basically Clinton-era rules, have not proven to satisfy either ideal. You know, you have an oligarchy of companies. You have a lot of areas in the country where there's no competition at all, or very minimal competition. And you know, the argument for that is, well, certain infrastructure requires efficiencies, and I think that's true in some cases. You know, you wouldn't want to have, you know, total free-for-all on the electric utility front because you need to have one grid. If you got lots of random grids out there, the whole system's not going to work very well. So some things you need to have some central planning. But if you're going to do that, the regulation has to have the public interest in mind and not just give a free rein to an oligarchy to jack up prices and give it as poor a service as possible and have no recourse for the consumer, which is what you're suffering with right now. So I think here's an example which the right may plausibly argue, here's a bad example of governments colluding with business. And I would just say, sure, you got a bad example there. Let's do something about that example. It doesn't mean every regulation is inherently bad. You either have to have, you know, smarter regulation while keeping your efficiencies, or you say, you know, the efficiency angle here for cable TV is not paramount. Let's break them all up and change the rules outright, so there's a lot more smaller companies out there. I'd be happy to try out either thing in this particular case because the current situation is not working very well.
Here's the other interesting thing, Bill, which I don't write about, but I think you could argue that what happened, that this law, let me pull it up here, there's not a law, there's actually just a court precedent. It was a 1991 case, Grand Upright Music Ltd. Versus Warner Brothers Records, that changed hip-hop music forever, as the Post article says. That court case essentially, you know, created this environment where, you know, people would be fined heavily for sampling. You could argue that what happened was that in the beginning of hip-hop and in the rap industry, it was the Wild West. And the industry got started and grew to be strong by allowing sampling. And that was good while it lasted. But sampling, by its very nature, is derivative. And you could argue that if you can steal something, you're not going to create something new. So you could argue that this court case actually forced hip-hop artists to become more innovative and creative, and rather than stealing or sampling someone else's material, inventing their own. So you could argue that it was good that the regulation or that the court case or precedent or whatever, you know, initially it was the Wild West. Hip-hop got to get started by borrowing from music that people were familiar with. The Beastie Boys used Led Zeppelin songs, for example, let's say. And so people who liked rock and roll but normally wouldn't like rap, maybe they were attracted to it. But then later on, because of the regulation, they were forced to be creative and innovative and write their own music. So maybe it was actually a salutary thing.
I agree completely.
Are you just saying that to shut me up, or do you really agree?
No. I think it's an excellent point. I mean, I think a lot of these questions about, you know, freedom and choice can very easily be interpreted through different lenses. You know, is it do the health insurance companies need freedom of entry to the market, and by having regulations, you are making it harder for smaller insurers to have a chance to innovate? Or do the individuals need to have freedom of entry? They all need to have the freedom to have health insurance. And if you don't have individual mandate or some other type of option, smaller insurers have business models that cut people out, and therefore people don't have the freedom to enter. You know, there's all different ways these arguments can be sliced. And, you know, I think the difficulty for policymakers is, you know, balancing competing values or parallel values in a way that benefits the most people in the most constituencies.
Well, and I've long argued that's one of the good things about the DMZ, that we appreciate those nuanced positions, and that we can have thoughtful conversations about such things as hip hop music.
I think we should leave it on that note, though, sir.
I think it's a good place to leave it. So let me call out our commenters. We got a lot of positive a lot of positive comments about last week's DMZ. People seem to like the fact that we have like one. A lot of times we do 2 or 3 topics. Last week we had one topic, which was your op-ed. People seem to like that. People seem to believe I was less hackneyed last week, less committed to partisan ideas that I've long since abandoned, according to one commenter. In light of that, how about this week? And because we're always fine tuning this show. What do you like? What don't you like? What should we do? Because we do read those. So
the question is, should we be doing one topic for a show, or should we be going back to multiple topics per show? Is that the
yeah? And should we talk about? Audience? That's one question. I would also like. This is a great show to ask this question. We talked about Obama, Romney, and then we talked about this other idea, like hip hop. It was kind of weird and offbeat. Which do you like best, or do you like both? Do you like the mixture? Would you like us to focus on stuff like Romney and Obama, like timely news? Or do you like the big picture stuff? So we're trying to fine-tune what we're doing always. It's a work in progress, even though we've been doing this for a couple decades now, I think. It seems like...
Put it in the comment thread, or you could tweet us at DMZ Show.
At DMZ Show. Yeah. So good stuff, man. And either way, we'll be back here next week in the DMZ.
Take care.
Thanks.